This is probably the best build I've ever played. It's insanely fast. It clears like 20 screens worth of enemies every time you hit your twister button. And its damage is fucking insane. Literally tapping pinnacle bosses and map bosses. And what's better, this is with fairly low investment. No headhunter or mage blood needed to carry the build. It just fucking blasts all the way from early endgame into the most difficult content. And in case you've seen twister builds before, nah bro, this is the ultimate version. In terms of scaling the build, the other twister variants got nothing on this one once you've obtained some gear. With optimal gear, I could 10x my damage and I'm already one-shotting everything. All right, Mr. Perra Gaming, stop flexing your humongous dong and tell us how the build works. Fine, let's do it. If you haven't played Twister before, then no worries, it's easy to understand. Twister is a physical damage skill that eats whirlwinds for extra damage and more projectiles. The more whirlwinds, the better. To spawn whirlwinds, we use Whirling Slash, as we will also use this as our movement skill. So you simply use at least 3 Whirling Slashes, then Twisters, and you have your rotation locked down. To spawn even more Twisters, however, we also have Salvo, and we have Barrage, which is why you're seeing hundreds of Twisters covering the screen every now and then. Another thing Twister does is it eats ground effects like Chill, Ignite, and Shocked Ground. Twister's on a diet, so it can only eat one effect at a time. But using the new Taming Prismatic Ring, we can force-feed our Twisters with all ground effects at once, and every ground effect grants gain as 50% extra damage for our Twisters, while also ensuring we shock and freeze enemies. This is one of the reasons this build became truly insane this league. Okay, but why Oracle Mr. Big Penis Man? I've seen all the other players use Spirit Walker, Lich, and all kinds of weird ascendancies. Should I re-roll? Well, if you want the maximum damage possible, then Oracle is the way to go. As you may know, we get inevitable critical for 100% crit, along with the unseen path and entwined realities for extra nodes. But here's the great part. Some of these nodes are rage nodes, and these few nodes actually near doubles our damage, because we're going to use these in combination with Berserk for extra effect, but also Bestial Rage and Mystical Rage, granting truckloads of additive increased damage when we pair it with the Crown of Eyes helmet, allowing us to double dip via spell damage modifiers. Last league all of this was possible as well though, and sure, it was already one of the best builds in the game. But now we also have the split personality Ruby, and this is fucking insane, because last league we had to do this whole pathing to get to the good nodes at the other side, but this league we can go straight for the ranger nodes, moving all the way down to grab loads of attack speed, the spear nodes, and a humongous set of clusters where we can pair it with an Against the Darkness jewel. But there's also one final thing that synergizes with these lovely changes, and that is the Medved's Felling. It now grants us 50% extra attack speed when we're rage stacking. And this is the reason I'm actually moving as fast as last league, but without having to spend several thousand divines on gear and expensive gems. Absolutely lovely. If you want to see the true potential of this setup, make sure to check out Bishowers on YouTube, because he's got a proper endgame setup going. Alright, and next there are some fantastic new gear options to choose from. So let's cover all the gear right away, shall we? I already mentioned Crown of Eyes. This is absolutely mandatory. This is where most of our damage comes from when we combine it with the spell damage nodes in the tree, Mystical Rage, and the Threaded Light focus. And as we're using the Threaded Light offhand, we want as much spirit as possible. This is where I can gain a lot more damage with better gear, because you can get spirit on your amulet, which I don't have. But you also want spirit on your helmet, body armor, and you can also get it on your weapon and boots now. But for your helmet, you can just grab a bunch of helmets and corrupt all of them until you hit spirit. They only cost a few exalts apiece. Also, grab a max rage rune here. The next mandatory item is a taming prismatic ring, as this will instantly double your damage, and you won't have to give a shit about creating elemental ground effects anymore. When it comes to the body armor, the Morior Invictus is actually fucking fantastic. It has lots of energy shield and evasion, but also some armor, which when paired with Anamamu's Gaze actually provides solid amounts of armor without having to invest in it. This armor has become quite pricey now though, so if you can't afford a good one, then just go for a regular evasion and energy shield chest or pure energy shield. Another great new solution for temporal chains and curses is using this rune, as we can make ourselves immune against all curses using this and one node in the passive tree. More on that later. For belt and boots, we just want as much defense as possible really, followed by solving resistances and getting as much rarity as possible. And of course, if you have Mage Blood or Headhunter, then use that. As gloves, I'm using Essentia Sanguis for the energy shield leash. Leech got heavily nerfed this league, but it's still enough to sustain me. You need to make sure you have Leech somewhere to use this though, ideally on a ring. Then make sure that you have an extra Frenzy Charge Corrupt, or just buy a bunch of gloves and corrupt them yourself. They cost basically nothing. I also want to mention that if you have a lot of evasion, then you can sustain simply by using Ghost Dance, in which case you can ditch these gloves for something better, like the Scene Equo gloves to double your damage, for example. Next, we have the ring, where we want as much damage as possible, leech, and at least somewhere a life regeneration roll, because when using Berserk, your life is drained. But with just one life roll somewhere and Chaos Inoculation, you won't kill yourself. I'm also using an unset ring here, because one massive upside of stacking spirit is you can use a lot of useful spirit gems. For Amulet, this one's decent. Most important is getting projectile skill ranks, followed by defense and rarity. Ideally, you would get a lot of spirit here, but that's expensive as hell. Then, anoint Mystical Rage or grab it in the passive tree if you can't afford the diluted delirium thingies. Finally, we have the weapons. In set 1, all you care about is getting a weapon with as much attack speed as possible, as this is what we'll use for traversing. In your other set though, you only care about damage. So, a good way to save currency is getting a weapon with a lot of damage and crit chance, along with bricked suffixes. Usually the expensive ones have attack speed, which is useless for the build, so you can sort those away and you'll find lower DPS weapons, but doing the exact same damage. Ideally, you would also have attack ranks or projectile skill ranks here, but that's too expensive for me. Lastly, the life flask is not important, but using La Vianga, we can benefit from a few nodes that are active as long as your flask is active. The charms are also quite important, as we can gain charges from them. Usually they require you to take cold damage or lightning damage to trigger, but since we're all the way down in the Ranger tree, we can grab Catalysis, which allows us to take elemental damage also from physical hits, allowing the charms to keep triggering. Alright, that's the gear. Next let's head on over to the gems and see what's going on over there. If you want insane amounts of damage, then you can use Spear Throw with Bater's Vengeance, freezing enemies to gain a lot of extra cold damage. I'm not doing this though, as I already have truckloads of damage. Instead, grab Whirling Slash. Best way to solve mana is getting one on as low of a level as possible, as we don't need it for damage. Doing this, you won't require any mana rolls or extra regeneration. Then, use Medveds for additional attack speed, rapid attacks for the same reason, knockback, which is important as to not get stuck on enemies when traversing, and lastly, blazing critical for some extra damage, and either magnified area for extra AoE, punch through for a small damage boost, or ideally, the Rigwald's Ferocity for 30% attack speed if you can afford it. I'm only using this skill in Weapon Set 1. When it comes to the Twisters, you want to have it set as Weapon Set 2 only, as it will snapshot all the damage from that weapon set. We then want salvo for extra projectiles. Projectile acceleration is great, as we'll be able to hit enemies additional times if they're fast and return to the target, while also benefiting a bit from the damage bonus. Armor Break 3, which is our way of generating frenzy charges for our barrage, as we'll use this in combination with resonance to transform endurance charges into frenzy charges. Next is Retreat 3 for extra damage and Deliberation for even more damage. If you have the currency, then you can replace these two for Rakiata's Flow and Garukan's Resolve, as that would double your damage. Next is Eternal Rage. If you're low on Spirit, then this is not needed, as you'll generate rage when hitting enemies with Whirling Slash, but it makes rage easier to keep up. Then, Berserk, as to boost the effect of rage. This not only boosts your multiplicative rage effect, but it also boosts your bestial rage and mystical rage nodes. And as mentioned, we offset the life cost via chaos inoculation and a life roll somewhere. After that, I'm using charge regulation, as we'll be able to keep up all 3 different charges and gain all of these bonuses. I also slot in mysticism here, which you can throw in the trash if you want. It's just a small damage bonus. Next is Wind Dancer, which I'm using for 2 reasons: evasion and endurance charge generation, because as long as we're hitting enemies with Whirling Slash, we'll build up combo, which we can expend via Aelith's Chimes for power charges, which via resonance will become endurance charges. It also blinds and maims enemies if we get hit, which is useful. Next is Ghost Dance, which will generate some energy shield regeneration as long as you're stacking some evasion. I find it quite useful, although I would like a lot more evasion for it to be more consistent. For now, I decided to go for more damage instead, because Big Dick equals Big Damn, and I need to compensate somehow. I'm then using Scavenge Plating because I had some spare spirit, and this boosts my armor. For farming pinnacle bosses, I usually swap all of these out for Trinity though, for some extra damage, as we'll be one-shotting them anyways. Finally, Barrage is used for its repeats, where I go for cooldown recovery, perpetual charge, second wind to double its uses, heightened charges and efficiency. If you have extra currency, then you should get Olroth's Resolve here, as it'll ensure you always have Barrage empowered. But again, that's also an expensive gem. And lastly, Sniper's Mark to create frenzy charges, which we transform into power charges. It's not really needed, but nice to have on bosses. I then boost it via Charge Profusion, Efficiency, Mark of Siphoning, and Eternal Mark. Mark of Siphoning in particular is nice if you ever need mana. Then you just mark an enemy, have Twister kill it, and you should leech back to full mana. Hey, great job, friends! Gems complete. Next up is the passive tree. Let's head on over, shall we? And then I'll teach you how to play the build. Starting us right off, we have Lesser Harm, making us insanely tanky, as all enemy hits are counted twice, and they take the lower of the 2. We also have Inevitable Critical for 100% crit, along with Walk the Paths Not Taken and Entwined Realities for extra nodes. Next, we head down here, grabbing all the damage nodes, rage nodes, and some damage. We also have Bestial Rage for a large chunk of damage, along with our first jewel, the Splint Personality Jewel, allowing us to chuck a UA fuck off over here and start grabbing Ranger nodes instead, as they're simply better. Grab all of the damage nodes, and then we find our first weapon set passives. This weapon set is for weapon set 1, which I use for Whirling Slash and Traversing. Here, we find my next jewel, and here's an important choice you need to make yourself. I picked jewels that has as much energy shield as possible, allowing me to get somewhere around 5,500 energy shield when mapping. If I don't have these defensive jewels though, and instead go for damage ones, then I would have to grab extra defensive nodes up here. That's up to you though. Both options work. You'd then just ditch some of the damage nodes, grab offensive jewels, and these defensive nodes. Either way, we head back here to grab the attack speed as our flasks are up, which we automate via Laviangas, And we also have catalysis, which automatically trigger our charms as we get hit. Down here we find some nodes for weapons set 1, Dance with Death, which is why I don't have any offhand in set 1, and some extra damage. Moving up here, we have some extra frenzy charges. As we're traversing, we'll be able to get our frenzy charges up, despite Twister being the one to generate them for us. Due to this, I only need it in weapons set 1, and due to this, I can grab these lovely damage nodes for set 2 instead, along with another great jewel, and a shitload of defensive and damage nodes over here. The Hollow Keeper node is how I'm avoiding all curses by combining it via one reduced effect of Curse's rune, if you remember. And in case you skipped and missed that part, eat shit. Either way, this is why we want the Oracle. We can grab an against the Darkness jewel here with Spirit, which when paired with Resonance, and this Keystone here allows me to grab every single node to boost it. And if you can't afford this jewel, don't worry, just grab a damage one and remove some of the Spirit gems. Next, grab some extra damage and AoE nodes for weapon, set 2, some attack speed here, and some additional defense. Lastly, we head on up here to grab Chaos Inoculation, so we don't have to bother grabbing Chaos Resistance, and can use Berserk without any issues. We do, however, need Ailment and Stun Threshold for this to work, but since we're rocking the Oracle Ascendancy, we can just grab the nodes over here. Also, since we have the Chilled Ground effect, we can rather easily freeze enemies, allowing us to remove all enemy resistances via Heavy Frost. Pretty nice. Finally, grab some more skill effect duration and the final jewel, and we're done. Next, let's head on over to a map and see how the hell you're supposed to play this build. Fortunate for you, bunch of brain-dead donkeys, it's very easy. You traverse across the map with your whirling slash and try to avoid enemies. Once you want to blow them up, you just press your barrage, followed by a twister, and you'll blow up the entire screen, both with twisters and your balls following all the loot you're going to obtain. And if you ever drop out of power charges or mana, you can just mark an enemy with Sniper's Mark, kill them with twisters, and you'll gain both. Finally, we have the bosses. Here you'll mainly one-shot them. I usually mark them with Sniper's Mark, Whirling Slash to get my power charge, and then Twister. If they're not dead after the first rotation, then I use Whirling Slash 3 times, barrage, and go again. Alright folks, that's all for this one. Drop a sub and I'll see you in the next one.